The NHL, it's got news popping. So you're tapped right back into your daily source for fantasy hockey news. And on our latest episode, we're covering a little bit of everything, including Tage Thompson back in the Sabres lineup, Boeser and Matthews injuries updates, and what's going on with these Nashville Predators. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, hockey heads, fantasy fanatics, and of course, degenerate gamblers? This is your show. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Wednesday edition. Shout out, salute, and much love to the everydayers holding us down and making us your first listen every single day. We do this show for y'all, so we hope that we've been pushing you to the top of these fantasy hockey leagues. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Start the season big with a big return on FanDuel. New customers right now that place $5 wagers and hit can get $150 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Mr. Roden, a little bit of a busy day for the boys here in the fantasy game, but that doesn't mean work as a GM stops. So knowing exactly what's going on around the league, especially when big names like Boeser, Matthews, Tage Thompson, we're going to talk about it. So before we get to the Preds, before we get to Boeser, Matthews, and bets, loaded game of board tonight, board of game, whatever you want to say. You know it. Over to you, though, to talk about the Buffalo Sabres, Tage Thompson, and I think is a Buffalo Sabres team finally, at least offensively, rounding into the form that we expected them to be. The back end, a bit of a work in progress, but this team's starting to look dangerous up front, and here comes their number one shooter back in the lineup.
Yeah, back and forth in the top three of the Atlantic Division for the Buffalo Sabres. Big win for Tampa Bay over the Colorado Avalanche. They fall back into that second wild card spot right now, but they were on the road, 3 big wins in California. Still going up against some lesser tier teams in the Anaheim Ducks and San Jose Sharks, but regardless, that used to be one of the most deadliest road trips in the National Hockey League was the California road trip. San Jose, LA, and Anaheim. They get all 3 wins. They come back home. They play tomorrow or tonight against the Minnesota Wild, another very strong team in the Western Conference right now. So it's going to be a big test for them. I'll talk about that matchup in big time bets at the end of the episode. But the Buffalo Sabres are a team that we've been talking about alongside the Ottawa Senators and the progression and the development they've made. Acquisitions, bringing in the offseason, bringing in key pieces and key guys, giving confidence to guys like Tage Thompson to be a goal scorer now rather than wait for it to come to him. Bringing in Bowen Byram, who I want to talk about as well. So I'm really liking the form and the shape of this Buffalo Sabres team, especially without Tage Thompson in the lineup right now. He should be coming back very, very soon. I think, again, the most impressed I've been with this season. And I want to highlight Bowen Byram because to me, he's been really, really good. And he's been a fantasy surprise as well. I think there's still a lot more that he's able to do that we've seen. But again, he's still a very young defenseman, 21 years old or 23 years old. He's got 13 points in 21 games. He's a +9, 10 penalty minutes. I think he can shoot the puck a lot more. He only has 22 shots on net, but 13.6% shooting right now for a defenseman, and Bowen Byram is still pretty good. 19 blocks, 20 hits, peripherals, again, a little bit to be desired right now. Still at a young age, still a lot more that he can do to develop his game and progress, well with this organization since being traded there. So I've been very impressed with him, this Buffalo Sabres team. And again, this is a bubble team for me. I think if they can continue to get some consistent goaltending from UPL, now, bringing back James Reimer, maybe Devin Levi gets called back up. There's a lot to be happy with so far this season with the Buffalo Sabres and their fantasy pieces.
What's intriguing for me is 2 things. Number one, when we look at this team from 2 years ago, the beast mode offensive season that they had, all their top sixers really clicking. They had the big season step out from Rasmus Dahlin. They sat at the top of the league in power play proficiency that year. I believe they were top 3, and it was a big reason why we started to see this team as a playoff threat. This season, they sit in the near the bottom of the league in the NHL in power play proficiency at 22nd in the NHL, which is somewhat bizarre because then when you look at overall goals for, they are getting it done. The Buffalo Sabres are near the top of the table in overall goals scored. And I might be butchering that number slightly, but the point remains is this. That top line that he will now center once again with JJ Peterka and Alex Tuch is a very underrated yet effective line. Buffalo Sabres sit 12th in overall scoring. Had to check that number. But the fact remains for me is Devin Levi was the guy that everyone talked about. And even headed into this season, some intriguing, perhaps back end of the draft, you could get a steal and snag this guy. It's been UPL and it's going to be UPL. 8-4-1 with a shutout. 2.55 goals against and a .910 save percentage. Those are the two fantasy standouts for me is what is this going to mean for the offensive group with Tage Thompson coming back? They're already looking good. So you bring back in, obviously, their most deadly shooter, and then you add in what this team can do at the offensive end. I'm really, really intrigued to see if this isn't a flash in the barrel, flash in the pan, or more of a long-term thing. And it is going to come down to that back end because we know they're loaded up front. To me, it's got to be the blue line and it's got to be UPL. I like that you highlighted Bowen Byram, though. Also somewhat underrated, I'd say.
Yeah, I think, again, the defensemen right now for the Buffalo Sabres, UPL included, they've been fantastic. I think we also have to take a look at Alex Tuch and what he's done in the absence of Tage Thompson, too. He's been a fantastic fantasy piece so far this season. Mm-hmm. He's on a 5-game point streak currently. He's got 7 points in that time without Tage Thompson being in the lineup. So he's been a very key factor for their success, with and without Tage Thompson in the lineup. He's been fantastic in fantasy league so far this year as well. 21 points in 21 games, plus 11, 13 penalty minutes. He's been filling out the peripheral categories, 49 shots, 30 blocks, 19 hits. He's a guy that dabbles with the physicality as well. He's not afraid. He's not going to back down from any competition or any fight against the opposition out there. So Alex Tuch and Tage Thompson, they have something really special right now. I think we've been very pleased as well with the play of JJ Peterka, who we've highlighted multiple times throughout the offseason, waiver wire targets as well. So that top 6 group right now is looking pretty solid. Again, if they can just get a little bit more consistent play from some of those depth guys in the lineup, we've mentioned Zach Benson, Jack Quinn, Peyton Krebs, some of those guys who they've drafted. They're still very young. They've got talent. Just show it a little bit more consistently. And those guys can be some key pieces for them moving forward, both fantasy-wise when it comes to waiver wire targets on Monday for the week for streamlining, and, of course, for the overall success of the Sabres organization.
Also headed into his injury, Thompson, 4 straight games with goals, including one of those games against Ottawa. He had 11 shots. He had 11 shots on net. So this is one of those scenarios that if the boys were getting it done without Tage Thompson, I'm very, very intrigued to see what happens with his return, which seems to be pending. We'll get to the rest of today's episode. Boeser, Matthews, what's going on in Nashville? And, of course, Wednesday's bets, trying to have another big week. Today's episode is brought to you by a number of people, but, of course, our friends at Built Rewards. You got to be checking out Built Rewards. And with the seasons changing, I'm already dreaming of a warm winter getaway. Steele, big boy likes to hang out on the beach, and I love using points to travel and always looking for more ways to earn on my next flight. Built lets you earn points on rent payments, redeem them towards flights, hotels, and a lot more. One of your biggest investments should get you more than just a roof over your head. And let me explain. You can start earning points with Built right now, and there's no cost to join. As a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent on every day that you're spending. Built points can be transferred to over your favorite things like hotels and airlines, even ones you've never heard of. Start earning points on rent that you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Make sure you use that URL so they know that we sent you from the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Start earning points today. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at Gametime. You never want a stressful ticket buying experience for your next big event, comedy, theater, music, and of course, like Steele and I like using sports, baby. Check out the Gametime app today and take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip, and I appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Big news for some Canadian clubs this week. Brock Boeser and Auston Matthews injury updates. Brock Boeser will be making his return to the lineup for the Vancouver Canucks while they continue this 6-game road trip. Also, Auston Matthews was back to skating, back to practicing, getting back into some drills as well, hopefully with this Leafs, with the Leaf squad. And we could see him back in action later tonight, perhaps maybe against the Florida Panthers. But again, from the media availability earlier today through social media, he said he might need a couple of days to get his legs and lungs under back from him. So, again, we might see him, we might not. It's been a long time, but regardless, the Toronto Maple Leafs have been hot without him.
Red hot. And when it comes down to fantasy, and these are the big names, we're going to bring you guys what you need to know. And unfortunately, this Matthews saga has kind of been a bit played out and perhaps not managed the greatest by the Toronto PR staff. However, it looks like he's going to be back. The Toronto Maple Leafs have clearly been clicking top of the division, 28 points in the Atlantic. The Vancouver Canucks, however, this is, I think, much bigger news for their lineup with JT Miller being out. Brock Boeser, and I know Brock Boeser has been somewhat of a polarizing figure, especially in fantasy circles because of somewhat of a lack of inability to stay in the lineup. I don't think he's actually ever played 82 games in his career. And looking at these numbers, he actually
almost played 82 last year. He missed one game.
There you go. So, and those are some of those little things that I'm not trying to nitpick. He had a sensational season last year, 40 goals, all-star, lit it up in the playoffs. This is big, though. And given that he had 6 goals and 5 assists in 12 games, didn't exactly jump off the page steal, but I think it proved that he can be a very steady 25 to 30 goal man in this league. I think 40 is a little bit high in terms of fantasy projections, but him coming back here, it's 2 things. It's huge for the Vancouver Canucks on ice success, and I think it's huge for some of these peripheral pieces around the Canucks where he slots in on the power play. Little jolt for Quinn Hughes, perhaps, with those apples that I've been talking about so much lately. Brock Boeser, though, as much as Matthews is the bigger name, I think the bigger impact, considering where the Canucks are at in that division, where I looked, I believe they've slid down to 4th in the Pacific. This is huge for the Vancouver Canucks, and down to 5th, by the way, in the Pacific, but also for owners that have him in fantasy circles.
Yeah, I mean, he's been very good for them. And I do agree with you. I think 40 was a little bit of an overachievement. I think if he stayed healthy and could remain healthy, 30-plus goals, somewhere 30 to 40 this season was definitely in the realm of possibility. He's still been pretty much a point-per-game player this season. Like you said, 11 points in 12 games. He's shooting at 23.1% right now, which is very, very solid as well. So for fantasy owners out there, you're happy to get this player back. Again, I think it does tremendous for the morale, the confidence in this Canucks organization, especially with JT Miller taking a leave of absence for personal matters, personal reasons, not going to be on this road trip with them. So it's important, especially since the Edmonton Oilers have been clawing their way back in the standings, find themselves in the second wild card spot, tied with the Colorado Avalanche. The Kings, the Flames, the Golden Knights, they've all been very, very strong so far this season and have been pretty consistent. So important road trip for the Vancouver Canucks, and important for them and fantasy owners to get Brock Boeser back in the lineup. He is a key and vital piece to this team's success, as well as, the lack of success. I don't know if you want to move over to the Nashville Predators right now, but
let's do it.
They have had nothing but failure so far this season. Failure after failure after failure. It's not funny whatsoever because, again, I've mentioned they've been one of my dark horses. I loved all the moves. And I think a lot of people like the moves they made this offseason. Nothing has panned out. Nothing has worked out for them. They actually just made a trade the other day as well with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Philip Tomasino, for a 4th-round pick. So, look, they're definitely open to making some trades right now and shaking things up like we've heard from some other teams across the National Hockey League. But is it time to really, kind of spiral and shake this locker room up with the pieces that you're able to move?
I think it's a very real question at this point now. A couple of weeks ago when Barry Trotz came in onto that radio interview and dropped all the things about a rebuild, and everyone was kind of, oh, this is shocking, and maybe he was perhaps somewhat ahead of himself, and a full rebuild might not be the term to use. But when you are now talking about your goal differential is significantly worse than the team in the basement of the Chicago Blackhawks, and you only have one more point and you have one less game in hand against a team like the Chicago Blackhawks, we have to start paying attention here still, because sooner than later, I really don't think Barry Trotz is going to be afraid to continue to wheel and deal. And I don't mean with peripheral pieces, but let me bring this up for you. Since 2013, of all their Nashville first-round draft picks, and I'll run this back for you because I read this earlier, Seth Jones, gone. Kevin Fiala, gone. 2015, no first-round pick. 2016, Dante Fabro, waived. Eli Tolvanen, waived. 2018, no first-round pick. 2019, Tomasino, gone. And 2020, Yaroslav Askarov, gone. So all of a sudden, a team that was kind of the pillar of front office, general manager, surgical moves with David Poile, and behind the bench with a bunch of good coaches, I'm starting to think there might be something more to read in here than we're initially kind of suspecting. Because also, if we're talking about fantasy, this entire team has been extremely disappointing from the opening puck drop. And I don't know about you, but to answer your point in a really long-winded one, I think they have to seriously start considering how you turn this season around or salvage what next season is.
Wow, that is definitely something that I did not know, with all those first round picks either being waived or traded, or just not having one. The funny thing is they still have plenty of draft picks and draft picks in the future coming up in 2025, 26, 27. I believe they have 3 or 4 first round picks this upcoming draft in 2025, so
which might make sense that they start to rebuild. So who knows?
Yeah, this is surprising that they've waived or traded a lot of those first round picks over the last 5 to 8 years, 5 to 10 years. So a little bit shocked. Obviously, they fully went into we're winning now, but clearly with the moves they made of acquiring Brady Shea, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault. And it's just not working out. Sometimes it's just how it is. Fantasy wise, I still think there's a lot to love with their top pieces. Philip Forsberg, 17 points, Roman Josi, 17 points, filling out those peripheral categories. UC Saros, still a .915 save percentage and a .257 goals against average. The win, the record is not something that you love to see, 6-10-2, but those 3 guys are still performing. If you drafted guys like Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault or Ryan O'Reilly, Brady Shea in my case, it's a little bit tough right now. Again, we've talked about potentially dropping those guys like Stamkos, Brady Shea, and others. So this is a tough position for the Nashville Predators to be in, because it could go downhill real quick.
Most definitely. And just from that depth fantasy perspective, a lot of guys last year, the Tommy Novaks, Colton Sissons of the world, Juuso Parsonens, that kind of showed a couple of real good weeks in terms of streaming assets in the fantasy game, who maybe because of that got a little overinflated in this season, heading into this season. Tommy Novak, 4 points. Parsonen, 5 points. Colton Sissons, 2 points. So when the top 6 that you really reloaded on has its growing pains, and those guys that you counted on in the bottom 6 are doing nothing, I really don't care how many Roman Josis or UC Saroses that you have on that back end. It's just not going to be good enough. So that's kind of panning out for me why this team is struggling. We'll continue to break down all of the NHL news and fantasy hockey insight that you guys need in 30 minutes, and betting breakdowns Monday through Friday. We got big time bets coming up. Why don't you take us there, Mr. Roden?
Big time bets, where you can place those bets. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. Like I said, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live by play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Once again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Continue to smash the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us. Again, we really couldn't be doing this without you. So thanks so much for making it your first listen every single day. Big time bets at the end of every episode, like we do every single day. Over to you, my friend. I took a big loss on Monday night. 0-for-3. You did absolutely fantastic with that Tampa Bay Lightning game. Over to you, my friend. You're running the show again. What's your pick for the what's your game you're looking at?
I appreciate that. The first game that I'm looking at is two teams headed in different directions. And overall, I think the Florida Panthers are going to be fine at the end of the season. And no, do I expect the Toronto Maple Leafs to continue to put up W's like they have? But they have 7 wins out of their last 8 games. The Florida Panthers have dropped 6 of their last 7. And right now, they are struggling to score goals. 1 goal against Washington, 1 goal against the Chicago Blackhawks is just not going to get it done. So right now for me, and yeah, you think I'm probably going to say hammer the Maple Leafs. I would lean to the Maple Leafs, but what I'm liking even more is actually the under in this one. 7 of the last 9 for Toronto have gone under the number, and 9 of the last 11 meetings between these two Eastern Conference foes, guess what, Steele? Under the number. So first pick of the night, keeping it simple, Leafs into Florida. I expect a very hungry Panthers team, and I expect Toronto to continue to do their thing on the defensive end. So Leafs, Florida, under.
Absolutely love that first pick because that's exactly where I'm starting at as well. All 3 of my picks, I'm looking at overs and unders, changing things up a little bit going into Wednesday night. I'm with you there. Leafs, Panthers, under 6.5. Like you said, 8 out of the last 10 matchups between the Panthers under the number. 8 out of the last 10 games in the month of November for the Maple Leafs have also gone under the number. And the other 2 games in the month of November, it was only over because it went to overtime. So 4-3 matchups in those 2. So I'm liking the under 6.5 in this game as well. I'm also looking towards the Minnesota Wild Buffalo Sabres matchup. I'm teasing this one down to over 5.5. I'm going to take the over. Okay. You could definitely go with the over 6.5 at plus 110 right now. You're getting a little bit of a lesser odd at over 5.5, but it's clearly the safer option. Buffalo Sabres are getting Tage Thompson back. I believe the Minnesota Wild will be getting Kirill Kaprizov back if all things go well. So I like the over in this situation at 5.5. You're going to get minus 110, minus 115, something along those lines. So I like that odd too. And then parlaying this all overs and unders with the Blue Jackets Canadians over 5.5 in this matchup as well. I'm teasing it down once again in this situation. Getting the odd up right now. Over 6.5 is actually at minus 110. I'm going to tease it down to over 5.5. Take a little bit of a lesser odd, parlay these 3 together. Again, a little bit of a barn burner situation. It's a back-to-back situation for the Montreal Canadiens. These are 2 teams that can score on the fly, transition quickly, and use that speed to their advantage, especially from what I've seen from the Columbus Blue Jackets so far this season. So once again, Leafs, Panthers under 6.5. Blue Jackets, Canadians over 5.5, and the Wild Sabres over 5.5, which will be my lock of the night.
I like these teases. I like getting a little teased down, a little teased up, Steele. Might just have to tease a whole bunch of picks and slap them together. I'm going to keep this one quick. This is a bit of a gut pick. The Washington Capitals over the last few games, and I understand they beat the Florida Panthers 4-1. Without Ovi, this is a different club, and I'm all here for the improvements. Logan Thompson, the blue line, all of it. We talked about Connor McMichael at length. This is a much improved team, but they went through prolonged stretches last year of struggling to score. Again, I understand that they beat the Panthers 4-1. The Panthers are playing some really bad hockey right now. So I'm not going to write home too much about that one. And then you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, who, they've dropped a couple of games out of their last 5, but they've also won 4 of 6, and the offense is clicking. A big 8-2 victory over Colorado as well is one of those situations that I think this team may have just been awakened from some sort of slumber. Even though the offense was clicking, this could just be one of those galvanizing moments for the whole team. So Tampa Bay at home on the money line. This is a pretty dead split head-to-head. However, edge Tampa 6-4 in their last 10 against Washington. We know how well they play at Amalie Arena, a fortress at home. So Bolts on the money line at home is my second pick lock of the night. This one feels like it's almost too good to be true, Steele. The Ottawa Senators head into the San Jose Sharks. Again, big win for the Ottawa Senators, who had dropped a bunch of really close one-goal games, and they squeak one out against Calgary. I think it's going to be huge for their confidence, but I'm not going to just jump all over Ottawa because the San Jose Sharks have looked pretty good as well. And Ottawa, even though they're a better road team than they are at home, I believe that's what the numbers were indicating anyway. They pretty much kill it on the road and they struggle at home. I thought that's what it was. Maybe it's reversed. Anyway, I'm going to go with the over here. I think this has high scoring written all over it. And if you want to get into Steele's bag and tease it down a little bit, you can. Let me just reclaim that last statement. The Ottawa Senators are 6-5-1 at home and 3-6 on the road. So another reason why I'm a little wary of laying them on the money line here, but I'm loving the over. Both teams have been involved in a bunch of crooked scoring games. Both teams starting to feel it confidently in the offensive end. Lock of the night, along with the under in the Leafs and taking Tampa at home, is the over 6.5 in this San Jose Ottawa tilt. I'm really liking my lock of the night.
I'm liking all 3 of those picks as well. Obviously, of course, the under 6.5 because I've got that one as well. But I like the Lightning money line. I'm liking the over 6.5. I don't think I would tease that one down just because of the poor goaltending from the Ottawa Senators, and obviously some inconsistency. Askarov, big win for him the other night as well. So I like the over 6.5. Not going to tease that one down, just like not going to tease that one down like I'm doing with the other 2 for my picks on Wednesday night. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Those are the picks. Those are the locks of the nights. And make sure, again, for your second listen, you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, from both Flip and I, we wish you good luck with your bets. Good luck with your weekly matchups, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.